The forest of Velshera had no mercy in it. Not for the weak, not for the outnumbered, and certainly not for a lone Ethri warrior standing in the middle of 40 armed soldiers who had nothing better to do than kill her. Savara did not run. That was the first thing anyone watching would have noticed. Her kind never ran, not out of pride exactly, but because the Ethri had learned long ago that running only made predators chase harder. So she stood, breathing slowly, her long silver hair matted with blood, her spear held low in both hands. The spear that had, until 3 minutes ago, been a full weapon. Now it was half a weapon. The top third snapped off somewhere behind her, buried in the neck of the soldier she had killed before the encirclement closed point 20 feet in every direction. Soldiers. Keshri's soldiers, in their dark red armor, bearing the flame crest of Lord Mograth on their chest plates. They had crossbows, short swords, and numbers. She had a broken spear and a bruised left knee that kept threatening to give out. The commander of the unit, a heavy-set man named Drav, stood just outside the ring and watched her with the flat patience of someone who had done this many times before. He did not look cruel. He looked bored, which was somehow worse. "You could surrender," Drav said. He said it the same way someone might suggest a shorter walking route. Savara considered the offer for exactly the amount of time it deserved. She shifted her weight to her good leg and raised what was left of her spear. "Thought not," Drav said, and raised one hand to signal the advance. The soldiers moved inward. Not fast. There was no need for speed. Just steadily, the way water fills a bowl. Savara turned slowly in place, watching all of them at once the way her teachers had trained her to, looking for the gap that wasn't there. She had taken down 7 of them before the encirclement completed. 7 was a number that should have earned her something. Instead, it had earned her this. She picked the weakest-looking angle, 2 soldiers slightly out of step with the others, and lunged. She got through the first one. The broken spear caught him low in the side, under the armor where the joints were loose. He folded. The second one grabbed her arm. A third came from behind. She felt the impact across her shoulder blades. Not quite a blade, more like a pommel strike. They wanted her alive for questioning, apparently, which was the only reason she wasn't already dead. Her knees hit the dirt. The spear was pulled out of her grip. Hands closed on her from 3 sides. And then something fell out of the sky. Not something. Someone. The sound was wrong from the beginning. Not the whistle of an arrow or the thump of a dropped supply crate. It was a controlled sound, a deliberate sound, like something very heavy moving very fast and choosing exactly where to land. The impact threw dirt and grass in a wide circle and knocked 2 soldiers completely off their feet. The ring of Keshri soldiers broke apart in pure reflex, everyone stepping back from whatever had just arrived in their middle. The dust settled slowly. Standing in the small crater it had made was a creature Savara had never seen in person, though she had heard descriptions from traders who came through the eastern ports. Tall, broader in the shoulder than most Ethri males. Wearing dark-fitted armor that looked nothing like any metalwork she recognized. Smooth plates, no visible joints, some kind of deep matte finish that ate the afternoon light instead of reflecting it. No visible weapon, which was strange, except that the hands were bare and they were large and the posture was not the posture of something unarmed. A human. The human straightened up from the landing crouch, rolled one shoulder like it was mildly stiff, and looked around at the 40 soldiers surrounding it. Then it looked at Savara, then back at the soldiers. Its voice, when it spoke, was in rough but functional Keshri trade tongue. "Mind if I join the fight?" Nobody answered. Drav, to his credit, recovered faster than his men. His hand was already going to his signal horn. The human moved before the horn reached Drav's lips. The human crossed the space between itself and Commander Drav in the time it took most men to blink. The horn never made it to his lips. The human closed its hand on Drav's wrist, not violently, just firmly, and Drav found that no matter how hard he pulled, the wrist did not move. The human said, in rough but clear Keshri trade tongue, "I would rather do this without signals. You have 40 men. She had a broken spear. That seems like an unfair number to me." It released his wrist and stepped back. Drav rubbed his wrist. He was a practical man. Practical men assessed threats quickly and honestly. The creature in front of him had just fallen from a height that should have shattered every bone in a living body and was now standing there with the mild expression of someone who had stopped in to ask for directions. Drav reevaluated his afternoon. "Who are you?" he asked. The human answered, "Someone passing through." I heard the sounds of a very uneven fight and decided to investigate. It glanced sideways at Savara, who had pushed herself back to her feet and was trying to make sense of the situation. "Are you all right?" The question was directed at her. Savara blinked. Nobody in the middle of a battle had ever stopped to ask her that before. "I have had better mornings," she said carefully. "Fair." The human turned back to Drav. "I am going to give you a choice. You can take your 40 men and continue walking in whatever direction you were walking before, and this ends here. Or you can try to arrest both of us, and I suspect your afternoon becomes significantly worse than your morning." The soldiers looked at each other. 40 experienced fighting men had a certain collective intelligence, not great intelligence, but the kind that was good at basic arithmetic. Their commander's wrist had stopped mid-motion without visible effort. The crater the creature had made on landing was still visible in the dirt. 7 of their number were already down from one Ethri woman with half a spear. Drav made his decision. "Formation. We are leaving." There was a brief moment of confusion. Soldiers were not used to being ordered away mid-encirclement, but military discipline won out. The ring collapsed inward and reorganized into a march column. They collected their injured. They did not collect their dead, which told Savara something about how shaken they actually were. In 4 minutes, the forest clearing was empty except for her, and the human, and the smell of disturbed earth. Savara looked at the crater. She looked at the human. She looked back at the crater. "You fell," she said. "I jumped. From up there." The human gestured vaguely upward in a way that implied considerable height. "There was a ledge. The angle was good. That is not a normal distance to jump." "No," the human agreed. Without offering anything further on the subject, Savara considered pressing the point, then decided against it. She retrieved what remained of her spear from the ground, examined the broken end critically, and concluded that it was now useful only as a very short staff. She set it aside. "I am Savara," she said, "of the Ethri, 3rd Blade of the Vel Shera Border Watch." She paused. "Former 3rd Blade. As of approximately an hour ago, when the rest of the Border Watch was killed in an ambush." The human was quiet for a moment. Something in its posture changed, not dramatically, but Savara had spent her life reading bodies, and she caught the shift. Something like acknowledgement. Something like wait. "I am sorry," it said, and it sounded like it meant it, which was unexpected. "What is your name?" she asked. "Harlan. Harlan Voss. I was traveling east. Looking for something." "What were you looking for?" Harlan Voss looked at the direction the soldiers had gone, then at the tree line, then at the sky, briefly, with an expression she could not name. "Something that is apparently closer than I thought," he said. "The Keshri army does not move 40 soldiers into a forest to catch one border guard. They move 40 soldiers when they are already moving something much larger, and they want the area cleaned first." Savara had reached the same conclusion 20 minutes ago, lying in the dirt with a knee full of pain and her spear in someone else's chest. She had simply not expected anyone else to reach it with her. "You are going after them," she said. It was not a question. "I am going to find out what they are moving," Harlan corrected. "What I do after that depends on what it is." Savara looked at her broken spear. She looked at the direction the soldiers had gone. She thought about the 7 members of her watch who were cooling in the grass somewhere behind her, and about what it meant when Lord Mograth sent that many men to keep an area clean. "I am coming with you," she said. Harlan Voss considered this for a moment. "Can you keep up?" Savara picked up the broken spear, gripped the thick end, and moved it once through the air in a short testing arc. It would work. Everything worked if you knew what you were doing. "Ask me that again after you have seen me move," she said. The corner of Harlan's mouth did something that might have been a smile. They went east together, into the deepening afternoon, following an army neither of them fully understood towards something that was apparently worth 40 soldiers just to keep hidden. The eastern forest road was old. Old enough that the stones beneath the mud were worn smooth by centuries of boots and cart wheels. Old enough that the trees had grown back over the top of it, turning the road into a tunnel of branches that blocked the late afternoon sun and made everything feel slightly underwater. Savara moved through it quietly. Harlan moved through it loudly. By her standards, his armored boots were not made for silence, but he was at least consistent, which meant she could tune him out and listen past him to the forest. She heard the army before she saw it. Not in a dramatic way. Not drums or horns or the clatter of a charge. Just the steady, low accumulation of sound that a large number of bodies made when they were trying to be quiet and mostly failing. Breathing. Equipment. The occasional muffled word. She held up one fist, the E3 signal for stop, and Harlan stopped without asking questions, which she noted as a point in his favor. She dropped into a crouch and moved off the road into the undergrowth. Harlan followed. The undergrowth came up to her hip and up to his knee, which was not ideal for him, but he made it work by simply moving more slowly. They reached a low ridge, and she pressed herself flat to look over it. Below, a column of Keshri soldiers, 300 at minimum, moving in two parallel lines with a wide gap between them. The gap was the interesting part. In the middle of the gap, being pulled on a low cart by 6 draft animals that were visibly unhappy about the assignment, was a cage. The cage was iron. The bars were as thick as her forearm, spaced tightly, bolted at every intersection. It was the kind of cage you built when you were genuinely afraid of what you were putting inside it. And inside it, curled against the far wall with its knees drawn up and its head down, was something that looked almost ethery but was not. The proportions were wrong. The hair, what she could see of it, was the wrong color. Not silver-white like her people, but deep black with something underneath that caught the light strangely, almost like it was lit from within. Savara stared. Harlan, lying flat beside her, was also very still. He was looking at the cage. His expression had changed from the mild watchfulness he had worn since they left the clearing. It was harder now, more focused. "What is that?" Savara whispered. Harlan was quiet for 3 full seconds before he answered. "That is what I was looking for," he said, very quietly. Savara waited. He did not explain further. She looked at the cage again, at the thing inside it, at the way the draft animals kept trying to pull away from the cart and had to be forced back into line by their handlers. Animals trusted things. Animals could tell when something was wrong with a situation in ways that people who were busy thinking could not. "What is it?" she asked again. "Not where you were going. What is it?" Harlan's jaw moved once, like he was deciding something. "Something that should not be in a cage," he said. "Something that is going to cause a great deal of damage if it arrives wherever Lord Magrath is planning to take it." "What kind of damage?" "The kind that does not stay local," Harlan said. "The kind that spreads." Savara looked at the column below. 300 soldiers. The cage. The unhappy draft animals. She did the arithmetic the same way she had done it in the clearing. Quickly, honestly, without the distortion of wanting a different answer. "How do you want to do this?" she asked. Harlan looked at her. Something in his expression shifted again. More of that same weight she had seen when she told him about her watch. Like he kept expecting the world to be a certain way, and it kept not being that way. "You are going to help?" he asked. "You helped me," she said simply. "And whatever is in that cage should not go where they are taking it." Those seemed like sufficient reasons. Harlan was quiet for another moment. Then he turned back to the column and began counting. Not just soldiers, but positions, spacing, the arrangement of the guards around the cart specifically. She watched him count and realized he was doing the same thing she did before a fight. Not looking at the obstacle as a whole, which was overwhelming, but breaking it into pieces, each of which was manageable. She had never watched a human think before. It was more familiar than she expected. "There," he said, pointing to a place where the road curved sharply and the column would have to compress to get through. "That is where we do it. They will have to slow down. The guards will bunch up around the cage. That is also where they will be most concentrated," she pointed out. "Yes," Harlan agreed. "That is the point." Savara considered this. Then she picked up her broken spear, tested the grip once more, and nodded. "Then we move quickly," she said. "Before the column reaches the curve." They moved through the undergrowth parallel to the road, 2 shapes in the fading light, headed for a narrow bend in an old stone road where something was about to go very wrong for 300 soldiers who thought they had already handled the hard part of their day. The curve in the road was exactly as tight as it looked from the ridge. The stone walls on either side, old retaining walls, built to hold the hillside back from the path, forced the column into a single file that stretched out and compressed depending on who was leading and how fast they were walking. When the front of the column hit the curve, the back of it was still rounding the previous bend 200 yards behind. For approximately 90 seconds, the column was split. Savara had been a border guard for 11 years. She understood choke points. She went in from the left side, over the retaining wall, landing in the gap between the wall and the column in the half-second after the nearest soldier turned his head to look at something on his right. She moved down the line of soldiers the way she always moved in a confined space, not trying to avoid everyone, because that was impossible, but choosing exactly who to make contact with and exactly how. The broken spear, gripped at the heavy end, was a club now as much as anything else. She was not trying to kill. She was trying to create confusion, which was a different and faster goal. The first soldier went down before he understood why. The second one turned and saw her and opened his mouth, and she hit him in the shoulder hard enough to spin him into the third, and then she was past both of them and moving toward the cart. On the right side of the road, Harlan had gone in differently. He had not gone over the retaining wall. He had gone through it. Not loudly, not smashing it apart, but finding the weak point in the old stone construction and pushing once at exactly the right angle, and a section of wall roughly the size of a doorway had simply come apart, and he had walked through it. 3 soldiers between him and the cart had just enough time to look surprised before they were moved, firmly, efficiently, to places that were not in his way. The cart handlers broke first. That was common with animals. The handlers had the animals to think about, and the animals were already panicking, pulling against their harnesses with a desperation that was almost communication. 2 handlers dropped their ropes and ran. The other 2 tried to hold on and were simply dragged sideways by animals that had made a collective decision about the situation. The cart rolled sideways and stopped against the retaining wall. Savara reached the cage at the same time Harlan did. Up close, the bars were even thicker than they had looked from the ridge. The lock was not a standard lock. It was a HFY military seal, the kind that required a specific key carried by the commanding officer of the transport. She looked at Harlan. He looked at the lock. "I do not have the key," she said. "I do not need it," Harlan said. He examined the lock for approximately 4 seconds. Not the lock itself, she realized, the mounting, where the lock hardware attached to the cage. He found what he was looking for and pressed 2 fingers against a specific bolt, and she heard something she had never heard metal do before, a kind of deep, reluctant groan, and then a snap. The mounting plate came away from the bar in his hand. The door swung open. The thing inside the cage did not move immediately. It was looking at them, both of them. Its eyes, she saw now, were a color she did not have a name for. Not quite gold, not quite copper, something between those colors that changed when the light hit it differently. Its face was ethery in its basic architecture, but older somehow, the bones carrying a weight of time that she could feel even looking at it, the way certain trees felt old even when you could not see all of their rings. It looked at Savara for a long moment. Then it looked at Harlan for a longer moment. It spoke, not in HFY, not in ethery, in something older that Savara did not recognize at all. But Harlan's expression when it spoke was the expression of someone hearing a word they had been waiting a long time to hear. "What did it say?" Savara asked. Behind them, the sounds of the column reorganizing were getting louder. She could hear officers shouting orders. The HFY military recovered faster than individual soldiers. "It said thank you," Harlan said. He looked at her. "We need to move." "Can it walk?" The thing in the cage answered that question by stepping out of the open door, straightening to a height that surprised her, taller than it had looked curled against the wall, and then simply beginning to walk. Not toward the soldiers. Into the tree line at the edge of the road, into the undergrowth, moving with the quiet certainty of something that knew exactly where it was going now that the cage was behind it. Harlan followed without hesitation. Savara looked at the chaos of the column, soldiers reorganizing, handlers chasing draft animals, the overturned cart, and then at the 2 figures disappearing into the trees. She thought about her watch. She thought about the border she no longer had a post to guard. She thought about what it meant that Mograth had sent an army to move something in a cage, and that something was now walking free in the forest. There were many things she did not know, but she knew the direction of the answers. She followed. Behind her, the first officer reached the broken cart and the open cage and stopped. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. After a moment, he turned and started shouting for runners to go back to Mograth with a message, and even from 50 yards into the trees, Savara could hear the specific quality of that shouting. Not the anger of a man reporting a setback, but the fear of a man reporting something he did not understand. Good, she thought. moving silently through the undergrowth toward two figures she barely knew and something she had no name for yet. Good. Let them be afraid. They had started that part of the morning first.